Hi, this is Sean D'Souza, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation Podcast. This podcast isn't some magic trick about how to work less. Instead, it's about how to really enjoy the work that you do and to enjoy your vacation time. Hi, it's Sean, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation. If you were to look at my watercolor palette, you would notice an astonishingly messy array of shades. And yet I use only 7 colors to create most of my paintings. Those colors are purple, yellow ochre, yellow, ultramarine blue, black, green, and cadmium red. So why are there so many colors in the palette if all I'm doing is using 7 of them? The answer is backup. If you look closely, you'll notice that the rest of the colors are similar, almost identical to the primary 7 colors that I use. There are 2 reds, 2 oranges, 2 yellows, even more yellow ochre, blues, and greens. In short, instead of carting the tubes along wherever I go, I have loads of backup colors. When I mix the backup colors, that is red and yellow, I get orange. When I combine green and red with a touch of blue, I get black. Without that backup in place, I'd be stuck while on the road. A similar backup situation applies to article writing as well, and it's called input. And this takes us to the second part in this episode, the series that we're looking at. And it's about why we get this concept called writer's block that's popping up all the time. And in the first part, we looked at outlining with notes, outlining the whole preparation system. And then now we go to this very strange thing called input. We know where input comes from. You have to read something, you have to watch something, or you have to listen to it. Almost all of us know that without that input, there is not going to be much of an output. But it's one thing to just say you need input. Let's go deeper into it. Let's figure out what is really happening at that input level. Let's cover 3 topics as always. The first is subject matter, the second is cross-pollination, and the third is discussion and feedback. Let's start out with the first one, which is subject matter. Subject matter is exactly as it sounds. Let's say you're in the business of dental marketing. So what are you going to read? You're going to read a lot of stuff related to your industry. And if you're growing tomatoes on the other hand, or talking about retirement, you're going to start reading specifically about your subject matter to keep yourself completely involved with that subject matter, to understand what's happening in the industry. So a lot of it is the reading within that specific space. Even when you're starting out, that's the kind of direction that you go in. Which is why when I was the junior most copywriter in the agency, I would head over to the agency library and I'd pick up these 5 kilo, which is about 10-pound books, and they were called The One Show. And I'd spend hours poring through all the ads and trying to deconstruct them, look at the flow, look at the headlines. Why did they get successful in the first place? And then when I got into graphic design, I looked through graphic design books, then cartooning, web design, marketing, all of these steps. I stayed within the narrow industry kind of books. And you'll be remarkably similar. This is what any sensible person does. You read stuff about your industry. You read material about your industry. If you're not catching up on the subject matter on a regular basis, probably daily, probably at least twice or thrice a week, then you're going to fall back and you're not going to be the expert that you want to be. You're not going to be seen as the authority that you want to be because you're not on top of things. You're not on top of the history of your industry. You're not on top of the current trends in your industry. And yes, everything kind of, goes around, comes around. But the point is very simple. that if you're in that business, whether it's tomatoes or it's gardening or it's dental marketing, you have to be on top of that with your subject matter. And this is the most obvious advice of all, that you have to be studying stuff about your industry. And this brings us to the end of the first part, which is, are you doing that? Are you getting the input into your subject matter? Because without that, you're going to have writer's block. You don't have enough information coming in from your own industry to then feed out to your clients. So that's the first part. But this takes us to the second part, which is cross-pollination. And cross-pollination is even more important than subject matter. That's because cross-pollination is critical for creativity. Let's find out how it works and how you can put it to use. Yesterday, I was reading about retail brands. You notice the problem here? I'm not into retail, and yet I started reading about Casper, which is a mattress company. And from there, I went to read about the case study of the Barbie doll, which is again retail and of very little use to most of my clients. When you think about it, it's almost like time is being wasted here. There's so much to read about in your industry. Why go about reading something that's not connected? Yet creativity is about connecting two things that normally don't fit together. From Casper and Barbie, I was able to piece together a method that creates not just a brand, but a movement. And it was interesting from so many aspects, because Casper was completely unknown in 2014, and then in 2018, they were a $750 million brand. Barbie, on the other hand, ruled the roost for decades, and now mothers are actively avoiding buying the doll for their daughters. What is happening? Why is it happening? But more importantly, how do these lessons apply to clients that would be interested in article writing or creating information products or running a website? I found some pretty precise answers, but I didn't go looking for them. And that's the reaction you're going to have as well. It's very unlikely that you will enter an article about some other industry, some other thing, and go, this is going to help me with my information products or my consulting or my training or my workshops. And yet, somehow that helps. Somehow that becomes a very critical part, because you're not thinking how the industry thinks. You're not thinking how everybody else is doing their stuff. And it opens up a world that you're simply not expecting. When people talk about writer's block, this is precisely what they're talking about. They're so stuck with all the topics that everybody else is writing about, all the things that everybody is mentioning, that they don't see a different world. When you have a different scenario, you're thinking about Hokusai's The Great Wave, or you're thinking about termites or volcanoes or whatever, the thing that comes up right away is that you start to get great stories to begin with. So your articles start off in a completely different way than everybody else's. Your world opens up. You get so much of this input that eventually it becomes a natural flow for writing articles, for the output that you're expecting. But you have to have this input in the first place. And cross-pollination is very critical with subject matter, but it also applies to media and style. So you want to listen to audio, video, as well as read books. People who aren't fans of audio wait for the opportunity to read. And if you take a typical busy day, there's not that much time to learn. Whether you're a fan of audio or not, you cannot ignore the enormous potential. While you're waiting in the queue for something, the audio educates you. If you're at the dentist, you just have to hang around. It's much better to listen to something. Whether it's about volcanoes or it's about your industry matter, it's much better to listen to that audio. Now, I've run into people who say that they can't remember what they hear on audio, and it doesn't matter. You don't have to remember everything that's on the audio. You listen to people speaking all day, you get information from them, and you don't need a transcript every single time you have a conversation with someone. And this applies to audio and video as well. If you are serious about becoming a better writer, then you'll put your headphones on, you'll get a podcast, or you'll get some audiobook, and then you'll get that exercise as well. But more importantly, what you're doing is you're cross-pollinating. And by this, what I mean is the information that goes into your head through a book is different from the information that goes in through audio. It's different from video. It's probably being stored in different sections of your brain as well. Now, no one is saying that you have to be a menace and listen to audio and watch video all day long. You can listen to the birds tweeting on your walk, but let's get one thing straight. The reason why people are average or average writers is because they're not willing to get out of their comfort zone. They like reading, yes, I get that, but the problem is that you don't have that much time to just read. And so you have to get input from various sources, from various media, and that is the way you can then filter it through, and it goes to your article writing. And that's how you get this writer's block getting out of the way. If you're going to get limited input, limited media, well, that's a problem. So cross-pollination requires subject matter, it requires media, but it's also very important when you're trying to get a writing style. When you first start out as a writer, you're likely to feel like a clone. And that's because your structure, your words, they're a result of some system, some formula. But then again, maybe you've not done a course and you're just following some writer's work. And almost subconsciously, you start to follow what they're doing, start to write like they're writing, and you start feeling like an imposter. This imposter syndrome doesn't feel very much like you have your own style. However, style isn't that far away if you're going to cross-pollinate. It's essential to cross-pollinate the writers that you read and the speakers you listen to, which means that you'll probably listen to a lot of audio on one podcast, but then over time, you'll add a second, and then you'll add a third. And maybe you listen to 4 or 5 different podcasts. And that's about it. You don't want to go too far from just working on really good stuff, or listening to really good stuff, or reading really good stuff. When you start reading 4 or 5 really good newsletters and listening to 4 or 5 different podcasts and not doing any more than that, all of it is going to meld together. You won't notice it at first, but over the next few months, and certainly over the next few years, you're going to have a style that's completely your own. You will write something and people will say, "Hey, I saw your article." That's what we call style. And it's this combination, this cross-pollination. It's a cross-pollination of subject matter to go way out of your comfort zone, then to look at video, audio, to read, to mix all of this up in terms of media, and finally to restrict yourself to 4 or 5 really good writers, really good speakers. And that way, what's going to happen is they're all going to merge and meld, and suddenly you have this style. But it's also provided so much input. And all of this input, when you read something that you agree with or disagree with, well, now that gets you all charged up, and now you have material. You have material for your podcast or your books or your writing. This writer's block issue is more about getting the input, all the time having input. When we started out this podcast, what we talked about was subject matter, how you need to be really fluent with your subject matter, and it never ends, it keeps going on and on. Then we talked about cross-pollination. But now we have to look at the third aspect, and that is feedback. Not just feedback, but feedback and discussion. And we'll take that topic up in the next episode, where we'll look at feedback and discussion. So what have we been doing so far? We've been exploring a writer's block, and we've been exploring why people have writer's block in the first place. And instantly we come up with this concept of pre-work. So we covered that in the first episode. In the second episode, we looked at the scarcity of input, and that was this episode, and we covered 2 points. The first is the subject matter, and you have to be quite well versed in your subject matter. And then the very critical point of cross-pollination that very few people talk about, where you go and you study something else altogether. You study something else altogether, you study it in different formats, and then you look at different styles. And all of that kind of mixes together in a weird sort of way and makes you completely different from other people. But it also gives you this input that you cannot expect to get if you just stay with your subject matter. So stepping out, straight out of that comfort zone into a world that you're not that familiar with, or many worlds that you're not familiar with, that's what makes it interesting. I guess I just did a summary there, didn't I? Anyway, what's the one thing that you can do today? The one thing that you can do today is to unsubscribe from all the stuff that you've been getting. If you have too many voices screaming at you, and especially voices that are telling you that you have to do everything urgently, you have to do everything today, tomorrow, just get rid of those people to begin with. And start to listen to 4 or 5 voices, or just start with 1 or 2 voices that resonate with who you are. And this could be a combination of podcasts and maybe newsletters. And that's what I do. I listen to In Our Time from the BBC, which is fascinating because it covers history and geography and cell structure and all the kinds of topics that you would never dream of. So that's pretty much a very powerful way for me to get this cross-pollination. I start reading case studies about Barbie dolls and Casper and a whole bunch of toothpaste and stuff that's really not connected to me. And so that's my reading material. And most often I will watch videos when I'm sitting down with Marsha, and we'll watch stuff about volcanoes and, I don't know, space, moons of Jupiter, stuff like that. And that's what I'd recommend you do as your one thing, which is to restrict yourself to 4 or 5 things. Get a style, get that moving, and also get this constant input that enables you to avoid that writer's block. We will come back in the next episode and we'll talk about discussion and feedback, and you'll see how very critical it is to keep moving very quickly through your articles. That's me, Sean D'Souza, saying bye for now, but wait. We still have to talk about what's happening in psychotactics land. At this moment in 5000 BC, which is the membership site, there is an entire series on coaching. And we're going to cover 2 or 3 of those episodes, but the rest of the articles, they're all going to be in 5000 BC itself. If you're interested in topics like the want factor, what causes people to want stuff? What is it that they're interested in? Or, how do you do this coaching stuff? How do you build it up? How do you build a niche? How do you keep going? All of these topics are very interesting, and admittedly, you can get a lot of it on Google, but no one is answering your questions. And this is what makes 5000 BC so different, because all of these article series don't come from me. They come from the client itself. The client asks the question, and then I write entire series based on the questions. I don't know where you're likely to find something like this. It's almost like a one-on-one tutoring, but in this format, which is almost like a book written specifically for you, the client. And that's why 5000 BC is such a cool place, and why I recommend that you join us. But it's also because we have a motto, which is be kind, be helpful, or be gone. And that is what we live for. That is what we live by. That is the whole crux of 5000 BC. So that's the first thing, which is get to 5000 BC and see how it is. To get into 5000 BC, you should ideally read the Brain Audit. So the Brain Audit, you get goodies for the Brain Audit as well. You can go to psychotactics.com, type in the Brain Audit, you'll see some goodies, you can read it. The thing about the Brain Audit is it shows you how customers make this decision in their head. It's all this very quick decision-making process, and you think, surely it's one step, but it's actually 7 separate steps. And read the brain audit, and you can get some brain audit goodies as well. So there are goodies all around the place, and take advantage of them. Read the brain audit, join 5000 BC, and that's pretty much it from Psychotactics Land. In the last episode, I talked to you about the pre-sale goodies. They're still around. You go to psychotactics.com/pre-goodies, P-R-E goodies, and you'll get your goodies. That's it from Psychotactics Land. I hope you're going out there and unsubscribing and keeping just 4 or 5 things that you really want to listen to, you really want to read. Bye-bye. Still listening? If you're listening to this podcast, it will have been my birthday yesterday. And yep, I'll be in Mexico. So my birthday is on the 2nd of November, and that is, at least in the Christian calendar, the Day of the Dead. And some of my most favorite songs are about dead, dead, dead. One from South Park, which you should listen to, which is called Someday We'll Be Dead. Renuka, as you'd expect, finds this quite disgusting to find so many songs about dying and death. Very cheerful songs, by the way. There are songs like Poor Cow and Dead, 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 and very cheerful songs. So I don't know what's the problem. But anyway, the reason why we're going to Mexico is because in Mexico they have this whole thing outdoors on the 1st and 2nd of November. And people go to the graves, and it might sound pretty gruesome to some of you, but I'm going to enjoy myself, and I'm going to enjoy Mexico, where we're taking our break, and then we'll get back refreshed. But the podcast will go on. We're queuing all the podcasts. I'm recording them well in advance. And now it's around 2:30 in the afternoon when I'm recording it. And the reason why I'm recording it at 2:30 in the afternoon is because I have these 3 voices that Renuka has recognized. One is very tired, one is slightly tired, and one is too exuberant. And she says, I don't want you to be too exuberant because you sound like one of those marketers that she hates, and we won't take any names. And then she doesn't want me to be very tired because that really causes her to struggle when listening to our own podcast. And so I have to be in slightly tired mode. So that's 2:30 in the afternoon. And there you go. Those are our plans. So if you'd like to send me a postcard, it is my birthday after all, send me a postcard to PO Box 36461 Northcote 0748 New Zealand. It's also on the website. You can find it easily. Send me that postcard. I'd love to hear from you. Bye for now, and see you in 5000 BC.